getting back to form now and the rendition of it, which was always my aim when I was teaching myself how to draw and paint. I try to isolate the basic elements of understanding light and shade. So if you take a sphere as the simplest object and a light coming onto it, a single source of light with no reflection around it, you can divide it, if you wish to use these words, into you get a highlight, which is the reflection of the source of light. You get the form is divided into a light area and a shadow area. They are the basic elements of understanding light hitting form. And of course the form throws a shadow, and I call that the cast shadow, if it's sitting on a plane, that is. Now you can divide the light area from the highlight through I call the half tones, until the light hits at such an obtuse angle that it actually finally no light from that source will hit that area. Well, that area, as it turns away from the light, is called the turn of form. I've probably taken these words from old books that I read on this years ago, books going back into the last century. And then in the shadow areas, if it's on a plane and a cast shadow, you get reflected light back in. So these are the elements of rendering form in light and shade, and they apply to everything that we see. So every form it helps to understand light and shade, can be seen in those terms. So that doesn't, if it's a diffused light, of course, that makes all those elements different. And if there are reflected lights, or two lights, or lights coming from different sources, well, that will enter into the equation. But basically you can understand the elements from that point of view. Now when you introduce colour, I like to think of colour more in terms of warm and cold rather than hue. Hue meaning the intrinsic colour is less important than the tone and the warmth and coldness. So taking that original form again, the sphere, the highlight will be relatively cool. The halftones will be, relative to the highlight, will be warmer, and they'll get progressively cooler as they turn away from the light. So the halftones, as they deepen in tone, will also get cooler. And yet, but even that coolness will be not as cool as the highlight, the reflection from the source of the light. And then the turn of form will be relatively cool as relative to the light area, which is relatively warm. And then the shadow area will be relatively cool again to the warmer area of the light, but the reflection in that will be relatively warm, and then the cast shadow will be relatively cool. So it's really important for me to understand these things when I'm painting, for obvious reasons. And then you get a dark object against the light object. The edges are terribly important too, because any dark object over a light background, the light background will be relatively warm, and the dark edge of the form will be relatively cool. Now that can happen even if the object is red or yellow and the background is blue, because red and yellow are usually thought of as warmer, or they are warmer than blue. But if it's dark and against the lighter patch of colour, the edge will be, the darker edge will be cool and the lighter edge will be warm, whatever the hue, so to speak.
So you're seeing warmth, saying brilliance, like brilliance of the colour gives off the warmth to you, like the scale of brilliance.
Yes, well, if you want to paint brilliance, you've got to really understand the warm and cold. You can't just do it by heaping on colour out of the tube. It's got to be in relationship to what's around it. So, I don't seek brilliance only where it is necessary, because in nature, not every, it's only when you want the contrast and when you want something to come forward or back that it helps to understand the physics of light and what I've been talking about, warm and cold. I mentioned earlier that only in the last few years has this started to come through in my consciousness anyway. And I like to think sometimes that I'm painting, this happens naturally, but I'm actually painting in light with mixing colour on my palette. I like to think, once I've understood the warmth and coldness of, and how, because it's all tied up with the mixing, you do that unconsciously after a while, how much, if you're dealing with a skin colour, how much warmth you add and tone as well, because you can't just keep on adding warmth without adding deepening the tone. So the harder colours to get are the brilliant in colour but high in tone, that is light in tone. So when you've got a simple range of colours, and I use a simple range, from white I use cadmium yellow, and light cadmium yellow is very necessary, because sometimes, quite often, even in a portrait, you need a light but also intense colour, and the lightest cadmium yellow I can get is the best. Then I use ordinary cadmium and then yellow ochre, and then I like to have a light cadmium red too, the lightest one and the warmest one. It's easy to get the deeper cadmiums, but the lightest. I also use a lemon yellow sometimes too for extra lightness, because you can usually get a lighter colour. And for instance, when you're painting the lightest part of the sky, you need warmth as well as lightness. So I find that can be got better with lemon yellow because it has a certain intensity but also lightness. And then I use ordinary cadmium, and then I use burnt sienna, and which is a wonderful colour for. I use that quite extensively. You can glaze it, mix it with other colours for your darks. I mix it with ultramarine blue to get black, for instance, and then you can move things around. So if you want a warmer black, you just add more burnt sienna, or even for more intensity you can add a little bit of alizarin, and if you want it cooler you just add more blue. Very rarely do I use black. I do sometimes if I'm painting a gown, and it just happens to be the easiest way to mix exactly the right colour and tone, because most blacks are relatively cool. Yes, after a while you do feel in mixing the colour that you're actually mixing light, because you've already seen it in your mind's eye in the context of the picture, and it's a lovely feeling when you just get that right colour and the right tone and the right intensity, and it goes up on the canvas and does look like light or shade or shadow. And when that happens, you realise that it's starting to come together.